All right.
Guide me, I'm
Attorney
sorry.
General William Barr has reportedly told associates he disagrees with the Justice Department's Inspector General on one of the key findings in his anticipated report. According to the Washington Post, Barr has not been convinced of DOJ Inspector General Michael Horowitz's conclusion that the FBI had appropriate grounds to launch the investigation into the Trump campaign in 2016, according to people familiar with the matter. The Inspector General report is currently being finalized and will be released next week. The Attorney General has faced criticism in the past for publicly defending the president and for giving off the appearance of not being completely impartial. It is unclear how Barr will react publicly, but it is a standard practice for every Inspector General report to include a written response from the department. Former Justice Department spokesman Matt Miller tweeted about the report, quote, "Unreal. It is not uncommon for an AG to disagree with an IG finding because it is too tough on the DOJ. I have never heard of an IG confirming the department did things correctly and an AG disputing it. Just shocking partisan behavior." In response to the Washington Post article, a spokeswoman from the Justice Department released a statement saying the Inspector General's investigation is a credit to the Department of Justice. Rather than speculating, people should read the report for themselves next week. Watch the Inspector General's testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee and draw their own conclusions about these important matters. Joe?
Well, I really don't know what to make of that statement, Willie, given the article that was out yesterday. This is an attorney general, though, who misrepresented the Mueller report weeks before it was released because he wanted to spin it most favorably for the President of the United States, and he did so in a way that even Robert Mueller believed twisted the words from the proper context. This is also an attorney general who lied, committed perjury in front of congressional committees. For some reason, they haven't decided to bring him up on charges for that. And here, as Matt Miller said, if these reports are accurate, here is an attorney general who actually is attacking an inspector general for not being critical enough of his own agencies. Again, you have Donald Trump, you have Vladimir Putin, and you have William Barr now, pretty maids all in a row, lined up, wanting to disparage U.S. intel agencies at all costs.
Well, that back and forth that Mika just laid out is a pretty good snapshot of where the Justice Department is right now, where you have the IG of the Justice Department preparing a report. You have the head of the Justice Department, the Attorney General, going after that report. And then the Justice Department spokesperson putting out a statement that basically implicitly criticizes the Attorney General by saying the report is good and well-founded. But what he's arguing, Attorney General Barr, is that the entire predicate for starting the 2016 FBI investigation into the Trump campaign with Russia is ill-founded, is not based in anything that should have been investigated. So you have, as we've seen with Secretary Pompeo at the top of the State Department, now we see with Attorney General Barr, and we have seen at the top of the Justice Department, someone who, like all the Republicans we've been talking about in Congress this morning, have decided to put the president and the defense of the president over their obligation to the country, over their obligation to the Constitution. It's not the first time, Gene Robinson, that we've seen this from Attorney General Barr. He's made a habit of going out and making public statements that overstep where an attorney general usually would be to go out and defend the president of the United States.
He does. This is really disgraceful. Why should we expect anything else from William Barr at this point? But he really is functioning like Donald Trump's personal attorney, and not as the Attorney General of the United States. And this is, I can't believe that someone with his experience, with his resume, with his career in Washington, would want to end it this way, basically, as a Trumpist hack who is going out of his way and doing all these extraordinary things in what I think will ultimately be a vain attempt to protect the reputation of President Donald Trump. It's just it's ridiculous, really, an attorney general saying, you're not critical enough of my agencies. It's never happened, and for good reason. It's just crazy.
Well, and if you want to know just the depths of the Attorney General's bad faith, look to past interviews where he's actually dug up a conspiracy theory. If you look at the timeline, every bit as crackpot as the CrowdStrike conspiracy theory that some poor, pathetic Republicans are trotting around carrying Vladimir Putin's water. He has argued that the Steele dossier was the cause for the start of the Mueller investigation. Ruth Marcus, that was disproven a year ago. That is a lie. The timeline doesn't match up. And for William Barr as an attorney general to create these conspiracy theories shows, again, the depths of his bad faith. That's a talking point from talk radio that is a lie that's been disproven time and time again. The Wall Street Journal's talked about it. The Washington Post. Every publication has proven, if you look at the timeline, there's no way the Steele dossier was responsible for the start of the Mueller investigation.
Right, and he, a while ago, talked about the FBI spying on the Trump campaign. I'm astonished by this because I've known Attorney General Barr since the Reagan administration when he was a Justice Department official. And I know that he privately told people when he came back to the department to be Attorney General a second time for President Trump that he was going back there to help the Justice Department and to salvage the reputation of the Justice Department. And of course, as with the parallel with Secretary Pompeo, he's been doing anything but. And I think we should watch and judge for ourselves and see what the report says and see what he has to say. But I assume that the Washington Post report is accurate. And if so, it's just another example of the Attorney General trying to have it both ways. It's tails, heads, Trump and I win, tails, truth loses. So if you agree with the findings of Robert Mueller and if you agree with the findings of Inspector General Horowitz, then, okay, fine, this is great, see, it proves our point. But if you disagree with them, then you get another bite at the apple and say, well, they're totally wrong and I disagree with them about that. So let's see what happens. But this is just really disappointing behavior on the part of the Attorney General.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.